All right, everybody, it's the Jerry Metcalf podcast where top real estate agents tell how they do it. Chelsea Werner, she is an agent not only in Manhattan and New York, she's also a real estate agent who has expanded her business quite successfully into South Florida. Chelsea, oh, and by the way, y'all, she's also a Breakthrough Luxury client and member. But Chelsea, it is so awesome to have you on the call today or on the
Thank you
show
so much
today.
for having me. I'm so excited.
So we're going to talk about a lot of fun stuff today, just to give everybody kind of what I'm predicting. We'll talk about how you got into this business. It's kind of fun and funny. How you really dominated the market in this business in New York is where you started. I mean, that is, I think, maybe one of the most challenging, competitive. It's got a lot in common with South Florida, but in a different way. So that'll be fun to talk about, and then talk about expanding and working in two markets. So we've got all that to kind of cover. But before we do, will you give us just a little bit about you that I haven't said and lead us into why you got into this business in the first place?
Yeah, of course. So I'm born and raised in Miami. I moved to New York City right after college, wanted my Carrie Bradshaw moment, as everyone else does. Didn't think I was going to get into real estate. I have family in real estate. I've always had a passion for houses and design, and even on the weekends, when I first moved to the city, you have to look for an apartment. And I remember just being so fascinated by the world of real estate in this, because it was unlike anything I had
But you
ever.
weren't going there, just so everybody knows, to be a real. You didn't even know you were going to do this yet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was going there to live in New York City. And also too, people had always I had people family members who had said to me, no matter what you do, the best almost post-college education you can give yourself and work ethic you can give yourself is working in Manhattan. Yeah. Um,
Wow. How cool. I
so
wish somebody told me that. That's pretty
I know.
cool.
And they're if it's kind of trite, if you make it there, you can make it anywhere kind of adage. But
Love that.
they I remember someone said to me, they're it's like finishing school. If you can build a career in Manhattan and you can learn that work ethic, if you go anywhere afterwards, you'll kind of be a little ahead of the game. Now I think maybe that's a little different. But there's someone knocking on my door. I have no idea who it is. But
Should
anyways,
you answer it? Or are we good? Or okay. Yeah.
so so I took that to heart, because I was I'm a hard worker, and I, depend, no matter what I do, I do kind of give it my all. So, moving into New York was a thing. I was I don't really know what 100% what I want to do. At the time, I was working for a PR and marketing firm. It was a
Yeah.
fashion-based PR and marketing firm. I love fashion, but the more I got into it, the more I was oh, we'd go to these pitches at Vogue and Condé Nast, and I was these editors are amazing, but they make no money. One of them was, telling me they work crazy hours, which is fine, but and they get a lot of great clothes for free. But she was I live with my two kids and my husband in a 1-bedroom apartment in, the East Village. And I was okay, no, 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 I can't do that. So I realized quickly that that industry wasn't for me. I really wanted something that was relationship based. I really wanted something that was I people focused. I'm a connector by nature, and I was trying to figure out what I could do that would kind of align those passions. Because at one point I was I should be a matchmaker, which
I
at some
love
point in
it.
my life I think I will be. But
I
I
don't know if
was
the money's there either, or maybe I guess it depends
that
on
would be more of a passion project.
yeah.
But I love meeting people. I love meeting people. I like to get to know their story. I love I love building relationships, connecting other people. If I see a synergy between two friends, even if they don't know each other, I'm oh, you have to meet, you have to get together, whatever. I
Yeah.
one couple that is now engaged, so I'll take that. But
Put that
also
in your credentials in your matchmaker business.
yeah. But also at the time, I was 22 years old. Was making nothing. I was living in a fifth floor walk up in Soho. And I would always go on the websites, the Groupons, and there was a website called I think it was Living Social. I don't even know. It was all these deals websites, because I couldn't, it was New York City, and I couldn't afford anything. And I saw get your real estate license half off. And I don't know what made me do it, but I was you know what? I should buy this. Like I should just like buy it to have it. Like I really have no idea what made me, do it. And
That's
so I
awesome.
bought it. And then like 2 weeks later, my check bounced at my company. I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not supposed to happen. So my company went
Whoa.
under. Yeah, I was like, was living in New York City. I was like, okay, I have no job now. Like I'm unemployed. So I was like, let me just like I'm really bad with idle time. I was like, let me just get my real estate license as I'm looking for other jobs in like the marketing world. And I did it. I got the license and then
With your Groupon. I love that.
you're
Like,
fine. Like so randomly, something that like I could have very easily like had never
I mean,
touched.
how serendipitous is that? You bought the Groupon and then you did it. God, if you'd known your paycheck was gonna bounce. Man. So anyway,
A good deal. So yeah, and then I was still like not, I was still interviewing, not finding kind of what I wanted. Um, my cousin at the time lived in New York City. He was also in real estate and development. He put me in touch with like a very boutique real estate firm. And at the time I was like, no, like I'm not going to be a real estate agent. Like quite frankly, I thought I was too smart to be a real estate agent. I was like, I had like some of the people I had met, like even through my own apartment search, I was like, absolutely not. You know, at the
oh
same
my
time,
God.
I didn't know what to
I
do.
just remember thinking the same thing. Keep
Yeah.
going. Oh my God,
And
this
then
is
like I
great.
like equated, it was so long ago. I equated it. There wasn't, you know, I don't have the like level of knowledge that I do now, but I was like, I equated it with some of like the agents I had met who like, quite frankly, I was just like, like, how do they survive? And then, or like, some, it's like that old adage of like, the bored housewife, which whatever. So I, I met with this
This is
company.
all truth here. All truth.
I
Keep going. Oh
know.
my God.
I hope not to offend anyone because I'm obviously a real estate. I mean, honestly, to this day, I say the hardest part of this job sometimes is working with the other agents involved. Yet again, my best friend is a real estate agent who I met through my company. So it's like,
It's like a double,
I
like your best friends are real estate agents and your worst enemies are real estate
yeah,
agents.
exactly. But but yeah, I mean, so I got it. This is becoming a very long story. So I
Good
met with
though.
this very boutique company. Everyone was like the antithesis of kind of what I thought of a real estate agent. They were super like entrepreneurial and well spoken, and like they showed up for work at like it was like this open office, and they showed up for work every day, dressed well, like 9 a.m., ready to go. Like we basically had it was 20 people at the time. And the idea was like, you treat this like you treat any other job, which is if you're not out showing or doing something, like you're in the office, which I liked the structure of that. And I needed that at the time. And, at first I started out like, I'm not, I'll do this like until I find something. And then I started to really actually enjoy it and love it and, get engrossed in it. And it's like, my whole thing is like, you know, how you do one thing is how you do everything. So I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to like do this. Um, and
So
I
true.
didn't stop. So, and then of course it evolved. But yeah, it was slightly serendipitous. And like the first year, I genuinely, I think I was still so like kind of, not embarrassed, I guess is actually the word. To like say I was a real estate agent, like when people would ask me, I'm like, I would be like, well, I'm working for a real estate company. So I do, buying, selling, renting, but I also consult. And like, I was like trying to like, and then finally I was like, what am I doing? Like, I make more than all of my friends. Like, why am I
How are
like,
you going to get clients if they don't know you're a real estate agent?
well, I mean, I've at some point I was like, I'm probably like the most self-deprecating broker, but it like worked. Like people like they like the fact that I like wasn't, like I would walk into an apartment and just be like, this is terrible. Like I don't know. Like it kind of worked for me.
It's
But
funny, like authenticity kind of has a lot of value, doesn't it?
especially, yeah, especially, when you start out, or at least when I started out, you start out at the bottom. I was doing walk-up rentals and like those, it's a little bit more transactional. You're not building relationships with these people, but I focused on the relationship. Like I focused on the human, not so much like, yeah, of course I wanted to make money, like I needed to. But at the same time, the amount of I would like it felt nice to hear the amount of people that said to me, "Oh my God, you're like the first person I've talked to where I feel like I'm talking to a real human." Like the amount of times people said
Oh,
that to me, like, and when you hear that more and more, you're like, all people want is to feel like you have a vested interest in them. right? Like, and you care. And I did care. Like, I genuinely did care. So, whether I had to schlep up like, you know, 10 buildings, where we're, looking at, disgusting rentals, I cared a lot. And then of course, they remembered that. And then it became, $1 million sales. And then from there it became 5 million and then 10 million. And then, it just kind of grew from that. But
You know what's interesting about all that is that something I say a lot when you think about being a real estate agent. I think it in different ways it's very true for everybody. Like there's almost like this shame in being a realtor, or real estate agent.
yeah,
Is that like working with real estate agents now that I'm coaching? I'll say, what would you do if you weren't an agent? Like sometimes people don't want to do things because that would be too aggressive or that would be too weird. But like, what would you do if you were just like that person's friend? What you just
right.
said. What would need to happen to get them what they need? Right? Like what kind of conversations and phone calls and research would you do for that? And it's interesting how it goes from these weird processes and things that are just so much like what everybody's doing and so turns off other people, which is why we don't want to do them, to these authentic conversations and research and insights and all of the stuff that wins clients and does business.
Absolutely. Totally. I mean,
Which the irony is you being kind of like, I'm not a realtor, made you a great real estate agent.
yes, on some level, definitely. I think, well, it's also like it was like my own personal need to like kind of differentiate myself too, right? So, and then
Yeah.
like, positive feedback I got from being my authentic self of like, this is, I,
Who knew?
you know, like it worked. And I even say now had a call with someone yesterday. I'm not for everyone. Like I tell people that like as part of not like my pitch, so to speak, but when I'm interviewing with a new buyer, a new seller, I'm very honest. I say, my style is this. I'm very straightforward. I'm going to say it to you like it is. Like and I'm not for everyone. And I think people genuinely like appreciate it and respect it. I mean, of course, like I'm not every client is different and I'm in a service industry and I'm totally humbled by that and I will do whatever I can to service my clients' individual needs and their goals and whatever that looks like. And yeah, of course, if you have someone that doesn't like to be pushed, you know, I will hold back a little bit because I want them to feel comfortable at the end of the day. Like I know how to read a room. But
You're right, but how many people want to be pushed?
I mean, some people say to me, like, I am really bad at making decisions and I'm going to need your help with this, right? Or like I had a client come to me this year and they just worked with a real estate agent for a year and they said like we didn't find her to be very aggressive. And I was like, well, what does aggressive mean to you? Like define that for me. Like, so I wanted, to understand because I'll curtail kind of my approach so I can make someone feel comfortable. Just like if someone walked into your home, you would do whatever you could to make them feel comfortable based on their like personality, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, but what you just said is really important for everybody listening is what you just said was, it's so funny. We asked a question about, I need someone more aggressive. What does that mean to you? What is the definition of that to you? Like you want to understand, they use a word. It's crazy how we assume things and don't realize it. And you go in and say, okay, what does that mean to you? What does that look like to you? That's huge.
I mean, asking questions and truly listening is so important. I feel like a lot of people get nervous when they're talking to clients and instead of really taking in what the client is saying, they just are thinking of what they're going to say next. You know what I mean? They're thinking of the next bullet point they want to get to in their pitch, or they're thinking of something else that they want to show to their client to showcase a certain skill set or talent. And yeah, like I understand wanting to be prepared and put your best foot forward. And I respect that. But I do think like there's something to be said about really taking the time to listen and understand and ask questions and be vigilant and like understanding every person's desires, goals, needs. Like I use to people all the time too, like, I can ask them all these questions, but sometimes I love going into homes with people and really like, I watch them in a space and how they take in a home because sometimes, they say, oh, well, I really value views. I value this, but it's like, actually, no, when you're in the home together, you focus on X, Y, and Z, and maybe it's not exactly what you thought, but by even taking that extra step of like watching the way my clients interact with the space, I'm able to like just pick up on like visual cues and social cues and like how they might interact with their partner and the things that they point out that maybe they didn't even realize, versus like going into an apartment and just automatically like trying to showcase my value and like point out things that I think are important. Might not be what they think are important. So
Yes, 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 and yes. Man, you said that well. I mean, is that not so true? This business is about knowing them, listening to them, and serving them. And it's awesome how that in and of itself is such a differentiator. It's kind of crazy. Now,
yeah.
they don't really exactly train or teach this stuff, I wouldn't say. Going through you came into this, first of all, it's so funny because I have a very similar story. But I was like, I'm gonna get my license to have it, and I'm gonna do this because I'm invested, I'm a doer. This is you. And then you're looking for other opportunities, but the real estate world kind of just took you in. Now, as that happened, what did it like? You came in, being an agent looks like one thing. Your experience was different. And at what point did you realize and why and how that this is it? This is what I'm going to do?
I mean, I just really enjoyed it. And when I was very young and like, I'll like on the weekends, like I would, instead of, going out to brunch or going out, whatever, I would spend Sundays just going open housing by myself, or, I'd bring a friend and just to come with me. And like, I got really passionate about it, and I really enjoyed it. And I loved that every day was a little bit different. And then like, I think it's like anything, like the more I was like, I have to get over myself. Like I was like, I think I was dating my now husband at the time. And at one point he was like, I was vacillating, like, do I really just like dive into this or should I just keep looking? And he was like, you love this. Like what, get over yourself. Like, okay, you're a real estate agent. Great. Like you're, you enjoy it. You're self-sufficient. You're making your own money, which not everyone can say at that age when they're living in New York City. It's expensive. And he's like, every day you come back, like you with like genuine excitement and passion for what you're doing. Like, do you know how many people like don't have that luxury? And so
And you're going to make more money.
and the money. But, like so that like I almost need, it was like needed to like kind of kick myself in the ass and just be like, get over yourself.
Well, now,
Um,
yeah,
and
and
I
when you got
did.
into it, like this was something that you were a natural, but New York is not an easy place to make money and get business, as we said before. And as everybody just kind of knows, I mean, they don't even, I guess they've kind of figured that out, but there's not even really an MLS. So when you got, how hard was it for you to break in, get business? And maybe in the beginning, it sounds like you had a company, I mean, but like, did you get leads? But at some point you had to really make your way and make real money. What did all that look like and how did that unfold?
So I got really lucky. I was put in a situation. It was a really small boutique company, as I mentioned. At the time, they serviced a lot of like their bread and butter was rentals, and they serviced a lot of landlords. And they put me on this rental project, and it was like it was a kind of a cool experience because I got to help like brand the project. I got to help with everything from like pricing to walking units with like the contractors. So I was really privy to like every step of like a ground up renovation. And granted, it was rentals, but I was able to like kind of see things from a different perspective, which I really enjoyed learning that process too. And they said to me, well, you're going to need a break. We're going to put you on this project. I had, kind of proven myself a little bit at that point by just, by way of like getting other clients in other capacities. And they're like, but you have to put someone else on this project. It's too big for you to do on your own. And I was like, I don't know. I was like, let me try. Like, let me just try. And I ended up
Wow.
like servicing these 5 buildings. I had like, at some point I would, bring in someone here and there, but basically 100% by myself. And so you're talking about like 5 buildings that were probably had like 40 apartments in each building that I had to rent out. So it was a huge project, but it was like the best learning experience I could have had because I came up with systems. I like created my own like CRM system, internal CRM that like, because things like that didn't really exist at the time where I didn't know how to use them, where I would like literally put notes in my calendar, like reach out to so-and-so, like to remind them like of like, this show that's premiering tonight or like, and I would just So I worked 7 days a week. I didn't have like truly did not have like a social life like for the first probably year that I did this building. Cause or like I would, I'll go out like on a Saturday night, but I was, show open housing every single day, working every single day, hustling my butt off. And then from there, like, because I still stay connected with these people, like, in a year or 2 years, their parents would call me and say, hey, you were so great. Like, we're actually thinking of, buying, our son an apartment now that he's like been in New York for 2 years. Like, is that something you do? Can you help us? And so the amount of referrals that I was getting from these like, you know, small walk up apartments in Murray Hill in New York City ended up being like the best source of referrals. And it really just came out of me like, working as hard as I possibly could and parlaying it. And at the time, the company didn't have, they probably had like two or three other people that just focused on sales, not, and everyone else was more rental based. And so it allowed me to kind of like bridge that gap and get more into sales, which I was like, oh, in a lot of ways, this is so much easier because it's not like so transactional. I got to actually know the people. I loved the relationship component of that. And so I was able to kind of and then I finally did hire someone to help me with these buildings so I could transition into sales. And then from there, it was just kind of like a domino effect. Also, the people who put me on this project, they saw how I was able to convert my leads or my clients into like real sales business. And then of course they started giving me additional sales referrals as well. And it just kind of went from there.
Well, there's four things here. Number one is you're a person of action. Number two is when somebody says no, let me try. I love that. Just let me try. Like, who says no to, let me try. Number three is when you do it, if it's a big deal, you understand systems and you put them in place. And number four, with all of that, one of the most important things your system probably does is make sure that you have the thoughtful touches, the little thoughtful touches that make these big impacts to get it done now and create that huge future opportunity.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone, especially when you're dealing, like to me, a home is the most important thing. Like I'm a homebody. I like my space is so important. So like, and I understand it from an economic perspective, it's the most expensive thing you will probably ever invest your money in, right? So like that is super humbling to me. So I think, when you're it's there's so many conversations about real estate agents and our value add and whatnot, but to me, I've always just been so humbled by anyone who's willing to work with me and trust me to like help them with this process of buying their home. Even if it's an investment property, it's still such a huge financial undertaking that it's not, to me, it's just I have, I get so invested myself. Like I get emotionally invested in the human being. I get invested in like what the outcome is going to be. My philosophy is if I'm putting someone in something, I need to be able to put some, get them out of it. And I want them, to think of me in a positive way and see an ROI. And obviously we don't have a crystal ball, and I never claim to. And I think COVID was a really good wake up call for a lot of
God.
who did think they had a crystal ball. I could speak to any market, but like people want to feel, when you're in this type of service industry or any industry really, like people want to feel valued. People want to know that they're working with people that have their best interest in mind. I even like the commission of it all, I don't think is a bad thing. Like I want people that have skin in the game, right? Like I want somebody who's going to fight for me because at the end of the day, like they have a financial interest, like that's fine. You know what I mean?
That's kind of good.
It is good. Like
Kind of helps
it
create
all makes,
value and how the business works
well,
so
because
well in the
we're
first
in
place.
something together too. Like
Yeah.
people, like I'm never the kind of broker that's going to sit there and like count my money before, it happens. And but at the same time, like if I was doing something, I would want someone to have a financial like piece of the puzzle because it motivates them on some level too. And if you say it doesn't, then you're lying.
Well, and that's already been, I don't know if you've read, I've got a few blog posts, but one of them talks about that is I've had clients who were working with brokers who did upfront fees and a year into the business with no success, except for to extend the contract. It's just another low upfront fee. And then they call me. You guys can look at the blog post. It's about don't defend your commission. It's kind of the name of it. but create so much value, they're glad you only charge a little bit more than everybody else. Anyway, but at the end of it, I met the guy, knew exactly what was wrong. We sold the house in 2 weeks, full price. I'm not an agent anymore, obviously, but that I always remind everybody of that. But to your point, it's like because there was nothing invested. I made a whole lot more money than that upfront service fee company would have ever gotten, but they sure did get they got paid for nothing. He was paying
Right.
them for nothing, and then I actually they had told him to reduce the price like $200,000. We put it back on, told the story, got full price. Back to your whole point, like you need a partner in this stuff.
Yeah. And, I just think that like human nature is like you want to feel understood, you want to feel valued. You don't want to be working
Yeah,
with someone who's a quote unquote, who is a quote unquote salesperson or doesn't have a vested interest. It's not going to fight for you. And those are things that like I take really seriously. You know,
yeah.
I think one of the biggest learning lessons I had because I did get so emotionally invested is like not to be, reactionary and to be able to kind of separate things a little. And that's a lesson I'm still learning because I do get so passionate about, my clients and whatnot. But, I think people can feel it when it's authentic.
Well, it's a double-edged sword of being a real estate agent. But again, it's your person of take action. No never means no. Let me try. I love that. System creation, thoughtful touches, little things make the big differences. And the undercurrent of all of that is staying humble and remembering never lose passion, but in that stay grounded.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk a little bit because you're really good at stepping back from a situation and seeing like you're in, like getting in the weeds. And agents, it's so easy because sometimes agents are such great problem solvers. We just wait until it hits us because we can fix it anyway. Like, but being able to step back and create systems and know what's important in a system, what to implement, how, where. Like when you look at systems for you and what's worked, you creating that first system and creating systems in your business now, how do you do that? Like how do you know what to do, move, maneuver, when and where?
I mean, for me, I think it's like everyone works in a different way, right? Like I know like if I don't make a list every morning and every night, like I can't like I won't go to sleep. I'll go to sleep with Ajna because I don't feel complete. So, I think it's really important to do something that like fits your style and what is going to you can actually stick to. It's like a diet, right? Like if you tell me like only eat chicken and vegetables and like you will lose weight, yeah, like you are right. I will, but am I going to do that? Yeah, I'll do it for 2 weeks and then I'm going to have pasta and wine and it's going to all go to hell. So I think like creating systems in my mind, like that's how I think of it is like it's like a diet, like or like a, life. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle, but it's about creating things that work for you and then being consistent with them, right? And just for me, I have to be crazy organized, especially working in two markets. I have 3 lists every single day. I have a New York list, I have a Miami list, and then I have a personal list. And I purposely organize them in order of like time management and like when I have to do it and when with priority lists, because that's how it works for me. You know,
Wow. Yeah. Systems are habits to create, or systems create the right habits
correct.
and prioritize. New York, Miami, personal. Now, managing, you've broken into the Miami market in South Florida. How do you, like, what is that? How is like, help everybody because a lot of agents have talked about doing it. They either don't do it or they're afraid to do it or they're trying to do it. When you look at doing it, what's essential in doing this well?
I mean, I'm still learning. I will preface it with that. I was very lucky because I grew up in Miami. So like you have a lot of, New York transplants in Miami and they have a great work ethic and they're doing everything right, but it's hard because, you don't have an established base there. So I was like the opposite. I came to New York knowing virtually no one, having, no connections or anything versus being in Miami. I grew up here. I was able to see how the city evolved. Like I've always been interested in the real estate down here, even if it was like for my own personal, not even from a business perspective, but for my own personal, you know, knowledge and interest. And so, for me, it's all about balance and it's all about trying to figure out like not taking on too much so that I can really be my best self in each market And so that has been like the toughest thing is, you have to, this is an in-person job. So finding the right balance and also really also understanding, you know, that things don't work the same in every market, and you have to kind of be willing to be nimble on some levels and really kind of pivot accordingly to how work is done in a different place, which isn't, when you've done something that works, you have a formula that works, to adjust that formula can be difficult, right? So it does take a lot of like reflection, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of like moments of being like, okay, like this isn't working, what do I need to tweak? And like being able to kind of do that in a way that's, doesn't make, there's moments where I get frustrated, or I'm like, oh gosh, this is too much. But then it's just about like pausing, adjusting, and, kind of pivoting accordingly.
It's kind of like when you say that, I think it's like even how business is won and how agents are even perceived from one market to another.
It's very different. I mean, New York is, listen, at the end of the day, I think there's certain fundamentals that make you successful in any market. You have to be able to work hard. You have to understand the market that you're working in. You have to take the time to, like, for me at least, like I studied my butt off when I came back down here because yes, I'm from Miami, but things have changed. And for me to just pretend like, oh, I grew up in this neighborhood, so I know it. No. With that said, I do think that there's certain business fundamentals that just work no matter where you are. And then there's like a more niche part of it, right? Of like, this is how things are done in New York. They're not necessarily how things are done in Miami. Brokers put themselves out there in a different way, I think, from like a marketing and social media perspective than they do in the city. And that's part of it here. And like, you have to be willing to be open to that. And, for me, that's really out of my comfort zone, but I'm working on it because if that's what's people value down here, then yeah, I'll do it.
Well, it's kind of like, in New York, there was what worked, but then there was what made you different. And I
Right.
think in Miami, in some ways, it's okay, there's what works, but then there's the part of that that's making you different and even more attractive, just especially there's so much movement between, it's like I call New York and Miami spouses. There's so much
Yeah.
movement between those markets, and yet in many ways they are so different.
Yeah, there's a lot of synergy, and I think there's something to that as well. Like for me, it's like you like to work with people that kind of have a shared experience or you can identify with on some level. Like I can identify with the people who lived in New York and are now transitioning here because I experienced it personally, I experienced it professionally. I can, create I can basically give like analogies. Okay, if you were in this neighborhood in New York, you're gonna like, and you liked X, Y, and Z about that, then you can do this. Then this is where you'd want to be in Miami, just by way of example. So like I'm able to really, take both like knowledge bases and mesh them together, which I think is helpful. Just like in a way where like you want, again, like people want to work with people that they feel a kinship with. And New Yorkers have a kinship. People that are from Miami have a kinship. So there's something to be said about that.
No, it's so true. When you look, so, you went into New York knowing no one, and you started in rentals, and it was even like the secret realtor that made it anyway. But over time, what a lot of listeners may know about you, but they should know about you, is over time, you built a huge network representing some of the highest net worth people on this planet and listing some really expensive homes. Now, that didn't come because somebody handed that to you, that came through hard work, market knowledge, and relationships. When you look back at that, how, like, if you could go back and say, and explain to somebody how you do that, what is it? What did you learn? How did you build those relationships?
I mean, for me, there were some like fundamental lessons that I have learned that I've carried with me into every deal that I think has made me successful. One, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, but like it really comes down to the relationship on trying to understanding what somebody wants, understanding their goals, and understanding also like how their comfort level of how we get from point A to point B. And there's some people that worked with for years before we transacted. And that's, that was fine. I also think it's really important to understand numbers, understand not just real estate, but like the ancillary industries around it, so that you can speak to some of these, other industries that directly or indirectly affect what you do in real estate, right? And not every broker takes the time to really do that and know that. But if you're talking to somebody, and we're talking about, again, one of the most expensive assets they have or purchases they are about to make, you should you need to educate yourself and edify yourself on um, these tangential aspects of like any market, like, and not to say you have to be an expert in everything, because a master of everything is a master of none, and I get that. But I just think it is important to be able to add value in other ways as well.
Understand the driving factors in real estate. That driving factors in real estate aren't just the house, isn't just what it's sold for. There's this undercurrent of activity that changes the outcome and does directly affect real estate. And just understand, especially in New York.
And especially everywhere. I mean, how many
Oh,
conversations have you had
yeah.
about interest rates in the last year? Like, if you don't understand how that works and what the Fed's goals are and what they're trying to do, and, this is just an example, like, how are you supposed to like talk to your client about, things that could impact the value of their home, right? At the same time, I think it also just comes down to trust. Like, people want to work with people that they trust. I will never want a deal more than the client wants that deal. And I don't mean that just from a financial perspective. I mean that from I always say to people, I can tell you if something is a good deal or not, just like via comps and analytics and understanding the market. And, there's some subjective pieces to an apartment that goes beyond a price per square foot that I can speak to, if I see a space, but I can't tell you if it's your deal. And I
Yeah.
think people appreciate that, because,
Yeah.
no one, like, I can only take you so far. And I think sometimes the fatal flaw of certain agents, and you know, I've definitely had this experience as well, where like you see something, you're like, I know this is a really good deal. You have to do it. You have, like, I'm telling you, like, I'm, like leading the horse to water, but I can't make them drink. And there's been moments where I've had to like check myself and be like, no, you've done everything you can do. You've explained it. Now it's up to them. And I never want someone to feel like, I've pressured them, or they have to make a decision or anything like that, because I want them to trust me at the end of the day. And, when it comes to a transaction, like, buying a home or investment property or anything like that, I think you really need to trust the person who's
That's
your
so important. Well, there's a couple things. I'm going to repeat what you said. There were two things that are like a quote, and then share, because the two sides of that are so important is, you said, I will never want a deal more than the client wants the deal, right? Like, what I want from my client is what they want. Number
Yes.
two, I think whatever your opinion is, but what I can't do is tell you if this is your deal. They're the ones who know if it's their deal. And the irony of that, whether it's something like you think they have to buy, I don't know about you, but there's situations where agents will take pride in saying, don't buy that. Now, here's my opinion on that. I've been the listing agent of a property where the guy who was representing the family trust said to the kid, don't buy that. And as the agent, I thought, the guy wants it, and I'm trying to tell you that we will sell it for this because it's only been 2 weeks, and we know the market well enough that in the next 30 days the offers are probably going to get better, and we're going to take a better offer, and then the market goes down. My whole point in that, you see people lose deals because people think it's their job to tell their clients what not to buy. We sold the
Right.
house for more money 2 weeks later than the younger guy could have bought it, and then ended up selling for more and more money. So my point in all of that is, it's like, it is to exactly what you just said. We don't all know it's exactly going to happen. We have the information, and we need to not want the deal. Like, obviously I wanted that deal, but at the end of the day, it was the buyer needs that space to know the facts and know if it's their deal. That's
And
so beautifully
and
put.
feel comfortable, because that's the thing, like, everyone wants to feel comfortable too. And if I'm sitting there, and yes, I think this is the best, real estate investment deal of the century, but it still feels uncomfortable for them, the last thing you want to do is make someone feel uncomfortable. And then, then the trust is broken, and then you have nothing.
And that's exactly what you said right before you said that. You said, I need to know what they're, well, number one, you said, I need to know, what do you want? What's your goal? Where are you now? Where do you want to be? And then in between all of that, what is your comfort level in getting there?
Yeah.
Like, man, this stuff, like you're going, yeah, but this stuff is stuff not everybody's thinking about, just breaks it down. Like, hey, we're here for them. And it's crazy how much more and how much better business we can do when we break it down to these little things about handling and working with clients. Now, did you know all of this stuff at what, 22 years old when you got your real estate license?
No, I did not. I knew not. I mean, I was, no, I absolutely not. And I'm a very passionate person. And one of the things that I've really learned is like not to react. Cause like,
Mm,
let's say a client loses something, like my initial reaction is to like, go to bat for them and be up in arms. And I'm very solution oriented too. So it's like, okay, well, no is not no. No is just a jumping off point to start negotiation. Best line from Clueless.
love. Anyway.
And so, but like, the more I think it comes with age and learning and whatnot, but like also to take a step back. Yes, being solution oriented is one of, I think my best qualities. However, sometimes you also just need to take a beat and really be strategic and really take in a minute. And also, you know, my job is once again to be an advisor and to help my clients navigate this process. And the last thing they need me is putting my, you know, energy into something because they're going to have their own
Our
feelings about
agenda.
it. And they need someone that's going to like let them have their moment. If they're, let's say we lose a deal or something, and they don't need me adding stress to their or disappointment to their situation. They need me to relay the information, to give them a moment, and then come up with a plan or pivot accordingly as need be, and learn from this in a way that's positive and constructive, rather than the 22-year-old me would have just been like a bat out of hell, being like, okay, we need to fix this, like, so I think that's something that I've definitely learned, and I think is, you can't always give good news, and it sucks
Yeah.
to be the person to give bad news, but
Well,
there's an art in it too, and there's something really important about being able to deliver bad news, handle bad news, and restructure that.
yeah, we're all living our own life from our own perspective, and in that we are all the main character of our story, and in that we are all the heroes of our own story, and we just need guide. We need good guides, not people running in trying to be the hero with their own agenda.
You're right.
So, do you have a story? And I didn't ask you this before, so I'm kind of throwing this at you from left field. But do you have a story like in your career where there were you have these moments where it's like the shit's hitting the fan, and then you're like, oh, like I learned things best the hard way, and sometimes I have to learn things the hard way a few times over. But do you have any stories like that of like those moments in this business where it that the shit's hitting the fan, but that's exactly where you figured it out and it all turned out a lot better.
I have a few. I mean, what I will say is like, what I always want to like kind of lead with grace. And so I've
Mm.
had situations where, you know, we've lost a deal, and the client's devastated, and to the point where they're like, you know what, we're just not going to buy anymore. And rather than push them or force them to do it, take a step back. I'll give you an example. So I had a client, this was back in a more of an aggressive market, and they lost three best and highest in a row. And I kept saying to them, this is how I approach a best and highest. You need to think, I'm going to tell you what I think you could get this for, but then you need to think about the number that you're going to walk away and be okay. So it's much easier said than done. So three times, this is what you need to do. They didn't listen. They ended up doing less. And then finally they got so overwhelmed. They were like, you know what? We just need to take a minute. No problem. So, you're disappointed, and it's also hard because it's like, well, I told you what, no one wants to be told, I told you so. And you can't do that. But at the same time, in your head, you're like, I told you so.
Mm-hmm.
So, but these people in particular, we lost three best and highest. They decided to take a minute. My whole thing is like, I I always want people to like look back, and even like if it was a bad experience, think of me in somewhat of a positive manner. So, we let it go, and I would just, you know, touch base with them here and there. And I would send them articles that I think were interesting, or I would, show them things that traded that were similar to stuff, things that they had seen. And we kept in touch maybe 3, 4 years. And finally they called me and they said, okay, we're ready to look again. And we actually just noticed that that first apartment that we had made like we had lost the best and highest is actually back on the market. And they did all these renovations that we were planning to do. And now we like, can we go see it? I said, of course. So we end up going back. We see the house. It's fabulous. And it's now a down market. So we put our hat in the ring, we negotiate, and they ended up getting the exact same apartment with renovations for actually a better price. And that was serendipity, sure. But, they said to me, like, your patience with us and like your ability to just like let us have when we like needed to take a step back, like, I think a lot of brokers would have been more pushy. And that's not my nature, and then they ended up with their dream home and quite arguably better price and not having to go through all this renovation. And they've been there forever and they've become really good friends of mine. So that's just, I mean, that is where luck meets hard work, I think, which is
Yeah.
a big part of it. But I mean, there's been so many times where, something hasn't worked out, and it's, you know, I think it's a lot about like how, your reputation is everything in this industry, and it's how you handle it and how, you lead with grace. That is what people remember about you. I mean, even if I had a client who I've worked with forever, and they ended up going with another, they worked with them in New York. They ended up going with another agent in Miami and buying something, 5 times the amount that they ever bought with me in New York. And, they called me and let me know and told me they were working with someone else and were very transparent about it. And how I handled it was I told them that I loved the agent they were working with. They were in absolute great hands. I offered to help in any capacity that I could. And I think that goes such a long way, because whether, they need me in the future in New York, Miami, or just, referral based, like, I think they really appreciated the fact that I wasn't sitting there, counting my coins. I was sitting there asking if I could help. I sent them a report about the house next door that they hadn't known about and things like that. And I think it went a long way. And, when it came to referring me to business in the future versus the other agents, like they did it. And I think it's because I showed grace and I showed humility.
Well, I love that what you just shared, because I found when I sold that being able to do that hurts. Like, it's not fun, but the importance of that, what you said, lead with grace, is when I learned that and respected. It's not an easy decision for the buyer either. It's not about being a quote good girl. What it's about is understanding and respecting people, leading with grace. And as far as the opportunity side of most of us real estate agents goes, is the opportunity for the abundance of business that's coming out of that in the future, and oftentimes immediately, that we don't know about in that moment. It's like all those opportunities that are right there that we don't even see until we shift and lead with that, not getting run over, not just to be a good girl, but leading with grace and meeting people where they are. It's
I
huge.
totally agree. I mean, yeah, I fully agree with that. And my mentality is always, you know,
Well,
how
you
can I
just
help?
said that. I was just repeating it for everybody. So of course you, but no, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I think, and it takes a lot, and like, you have your moment, you cry in the bathroom, and then, and then you
It's
get out,
exactly what you do,
you know,
right? It's exactly
you
what you
have
do.
your pity party. But then my whole thing is I just want someone to feel comfortable. And it is hard to reject someone or tell them that you did something. I've had to fire people. I've had to have the awkward conversation of, I did this with somebody else. And the people that handle it in a way that is gracious and understanding, you want to put yourself in their shoes. And I try to do that. And, however I can help, I'm a team player. I am happy to help, whether it comes back to me in the form of a deal or referral, or even just, good karma, or some, oh, I worked with Chelsea, and they have a positive thing to say. Like, that's worth its weight in gold to me. more, more so than, any deal really. And that was a $20 million deal. So that really stung.
Yeah. And that's something that you're really, really good at is because we've known one another for a bit. Um, like you're really when something gets tough, you're not afraid to have that really candid, honest conversation. And it's not confrontational. It's done with grace and it's done leading with grace. And in that is the perspective. You're leading with the perspective of the other person. Um, I'm sure you didn't do that as a kid, maybe as a 22-year-old, but how and where did you learn to do that? Because it's not as common as many of us who think we do it don't necessarily do it all the time.
I actually had a situation where that I learned from at a very like young age. I had it was a friend of a friend. We were looking at the time what was like a huge deal for me, looking forever, and at the last minute they cut me out of the deal. And I was devastated. Like devastated. And I didn't handle it amazing. Like I wasn't rude about it, but like I certainly like was upset. There were tears involved to a client, which like now I would never do in a million years. But at the time it was a friend of a friend. And I remember just being so devastated and I wasn't rude about it, but at the same time I let them know I was very upset. And it put them in an uncomfortable situation. So yeah, when they went to then go make their next deal in 2 years, they didn't use me. And I thought about that situation a lot because I was like, you know what? Had I just been, there's nothing I could have done at that point, right? They were going to cut me out of the deal either which way. Do I think it's the most, integrity driven thing to do? No, but people are going to do what they're going to do. And I, in the back of my head, it was probably the best lesson I could have learned because it did teach me like, had I just let it go and maybe handled it a little bit with a little bit more tact in 2 years when they went and bought that bigger apartment, they probably would have called me. But then it was
Yeah.
so, I had made it almost uncomfortable for that other person. And I probably lost out on business in the future because of that. And not to say that like we, as humans, we have the right to be upset. When you put in a ton of work just to get cut out of something, it's tough. Like it stings, right? And maybe it's not a person I would have wanted to work with and, in 2 years anyway, but still it was like
You remove the option for yourself though, essentially.
right. Like I would have loved the option to be like, actually, no, or here's someone else that I'm going to refer to you that's amazing who I think will, but I made this person feel uncomfortable because of my reaction in the way that I was so upset. Like, and I would never want, I learned from that because I would never want to make someone feel that way. And ever since then, even if it's, the hardest pill to swallow, I use that as like a mental note to take that step and really kind of how would you feel if you were in that situation, even if it's something that you would never do because it's a little shady.
Well, in every situation, have empathy, put yourself in other people's shoes. In every situation, look at the opportunity and the problem.
You
Look
just
at where this
never
is
know.
happening for me, not to me, because
Exactly.
some of the best things out there for us are the very things we've got all these ideas of what we want, but some of the best things out there for us are the things we don't see, and they can't come to fruition until we lead with grace. I
Definitely.
love that's you. I'm quoting you on that lead with grace. Like lead with grace. Like so easy to remember and so essential and important to do that.
It's hard, but you just have to also just believe, even if you're not a person that believes in the universe, like I really try to like come from a place of understanding and abundance and it all comes out in the wash.
And sometimes in our favor when we stick with it and lead with grace. That's the thing
Absolutely.
that's right. Like being a real estate agent, and we're going into our final three soon, but I want to ask you, um, like being a real estate agent, there are all these things that really test our character. They really test us on where it would be easy to just not lead with grace and get it all out because it's so frustrating, or it can be. Um, when you look at your business, I think you froze for a minute. Are you there? Oh, Chelsea, can you hear me? So we froze up for a minute there, but the question was, when you look at your business, like there are all these things that challenge us. And in many times those are the things when we overcome those challenges that make us so great. But how do you like what are the things you're like, oh, this is so hard, but you've overcome? And what are the things about this business that no matter what, you just keep loving it anyway?
I mean, for me, again, I feel like a broken record. It does come down to the people, and that's what
Yeah.
I genuinely enjoy about this industry. It's funny, like everyone is now like in that like work smarter, not harder mentality. But they're like I feel old saying this, but
Wait,
there's
did
some
you say work harder, not smarter?
you
Or
know, they
smarter, not?
did I don't know if I
I
maybe
don't know. Right. But I was like,
I
wait, I
said
think you
there's that. I feel like now
work smarter,
everyone's
not
in
harder.
the mentality work smarter, not harder. And I get that. And I respect that. But at the same time, like there is something to be said about hard work, right? Like I truly, truly, truly believe that. And yes, I would love to work smarter and not harder and make double by working half, sure. But there is something about really working hard. And I think that if you are consistent with it, and you also combine that with genuinely caring and being authentic and caring about the people that you work with, like that's like, to me, that's the formula, right? That's what it takes. And
Common denominator, Horst Schultz say, common denominator of all luxury is care. If you don't care, it's not luxury.
oh, I love that.
That last part was mine. Anyway, but now he says that his book is Excellence Wins. It is especially for systems. He doesn't talk about the specifics of systems, but he talks about situations and the importance of what's in systems in any business to get to the root of problems fast. He gives examples, and it's awesome. And it's not that boring if you don't, for those people unlike us that don't like systems. But anyway, final three questions. No, what were you going to
I
say?
also, sorry, I was also going to say,
Yeah.
I think one of the other pillars that I have had to learn, but I've also built my business on is about the devil is truly in the details. Like I had a mentor early on tell me, do you know what separates a good agent from a great agent? It's the attention to detail. And I think that's also something that is just so important and
Yeah.
maybe not discussed as much, but like, and I say this to my junior agents all the time, like you read that email the third time, take the extra second to do this, and also be okay with saying I don't know. I would so much rather, I was on a call with a client last night, he's asking me tax questions. I am not an accountant and I can speak to my experience, but I would so much rather say to them, listen, I'm not 100% sure on this. I can put you in touch with the right person who will be, and then it adds to my credibility. And I think that
Exactly.
people are people love to talk, especially in our industry. They love to say things, but sometimes if you can speak, if you are speaking to something and you don't 100% know, then you just come off as full of shit, quite frankly. And I'd
And you
rather be
come off.
the person that says I don't know, but I'm gonna get you with the best person who's going to know.
Well, when you, it's funny how I found, remember there was an agent in my market who was really successful. And as I started doing more work, I started doing more deals with her. And I was like, God, there's a lot she doesn't know. And she doesn't hesitate to just tell you. And she tells you with confidence. It's like when you're so good, you're confident in what you don't know, you're good. And whatever stage you're in, if you can own what you don't know, you can know what to learn and you can give other people around you a reason to trust you.
100%. I would so much rather be the person that doesn't know and puts them in touch with the person that knows, than God forbid say the wrong thing and then it's egg on my face.
And it's the opportunity to make a small promise. You know what? I don't know that. This is what I'm going to do to find out.
Definitely.
And then over deliver.
Yes.
Just
And
saying.
just over
I'm
deliver.
thinking about that's a Horst Schultz, but that's kind of sort of a Horst Schultzy thing that maybe you want me to, I'll go into it for everybody because I may read the book Excellence Wins, but he says every client wants three things. They want it fast. They want it to be done perfectly or he says, I think he uses the words, they want it to be done flawlessly and they want it to be done with pleasure. And if any of those is missing, it might be worse than doing it. And then he says, but if one of those doesn't make it, you make sure you say, I'm sorry. Then you make sure you tell them what you're doing about it. And then you make sure you do it. Back to like
Love that.
delivered promise, creating trust. Or Kevin Brown, I quote that Kevin all the time because he's so, I don't know if he's, you may know Kevin, but he says, make small promises and then over deliver. That
Yeah,
just
that
sets
was,
up the
yeah,
the trust factor. I was like,
a big
that's,
pillar. And
yeah.
my first company, under promise over deliver, was a very, very big message that I learned early on, which I also very much appreciate. And it also goes back, I mean, even going back to the whole leading with grace, it's, there's like that saying that people don't remember what you said, but they remember how you made them feel. Right. And I think that goes back to it. It's like people remember, they might not remember you, they might not remember, like, how smart you were, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And, that,
Maya Angelou. Yeah.
our earlier conversation of like, you know, maybe it didn't work out or maybe something bad happened, but if you made them feel safe or okay, then you never know what that's going to do in the future, how that's going to benefit you, but it's something to keep in mind.
The power that's in that, right? We, as agents, we think we got to force everything, but it's really like tap into a little power, how you make people feel, the knowledge that you bring to the table, the ability to say, I don't know, with confidence. And not because you're lazy and ignorant, because you know you're a good agent and you know you don't know and that it's good to do that. Like I remember seeing an agent do that and I was like, man, what is it this with like thinking I have to know everything? Me personally. So love it.
No one likes to
Right.
know it all.
Exactly. Exactly. It's like, what the heck?
There's
Anyway,
humanity in
what
it
the
not knowing.
hell? Yeah, wait, what'd you say?
There's humanity in not knowing.
A lot of it, which is much needed in this business, in this industry, right? Like there's everybody trying to be nice, but they're being nice for business. Just be nice because you should be. And then there's that other thing where they're all being aggressive and hunting people down. Like, what's that? Like, nobody wants to be chased down.
Yeah, it's
So,
dating. You don't want to, if you're going after the guy aggressively, that's not going to make them want to date you or vice versa.
well, like every woman wants to be pursued, but we don't want to be hunted down.
Right.
Like there's a big difference. I don't want the guy dropping one-liners with all the girls at the bar and not be the girl that it worked on. Like, nobody wants that.
So absolutely no, yeah. I often say like it's like dating. Like I'm like, I feel like I'm dating people right now, but I don't know if I want to get married to them yet, or vice versa. Like it's okay, we're just dating. You don't have to commit.
So true, isn't it? And I've been saying this because I heard this that relates to what you said back when they had like, I hate to say I sound old, but I know it. I'm not old, but maybe I am. When you could put the cassettes, I remember when it was a big deal to have a cassette player in your car. So it was on a cassette in my car, and it was like a Nolan, what Napoleon Hill or somebody like that said this. The very end, or maybe it was like Zig Ziglar at the very end of this great, like very proper 1940s or earlier speech. And at the end of it, he started talking about basically, except I think he said sex. I don't know the words, but it was like, it's the same thing. I was like, golly, that was so inappropriate and edgy back then. But I only heard it once on this one cassette. But yeah, it's like, it is the same. There's so much in common. There's so much in common. And when you have a client, it's like being married. Like you
Oh,
learn those
totally.
people really fast.
Definitely.
And think about that when people choose to hire us, who are, like you said, comfort level, like who am I comfortable? Like they need to be comfortable because they're really letting me in and understanding like that part of we like our part is so hard, but there's a part of the process for the client that's so difficult too.
Absolutely. And everyone's so idiosyncratic. So really understanding that and trying your best to be able to kind of go with somebody and like their needs and their quirks and however it works for them. Like it might, I say this about my husband and I actually all the time, like we'll end up in the same place, right? But we take very different routes to get there. Always. Like, and that's okay. As long as we end up in the same place. I don't care if you have to go left, right, center, and I'm just going straight. And it's the same thing with the client. Everyone has their own way of doing things. And maybe it's not my way of doing things, or maybe they need me to show up for them in certain capacities that I wouldn't necessarily do for other clients. But that's all part of it. It's all, it's really understanding the individual and being able to kind of curtail your approach based on like their wants, needs, and it's like almost
Well,
Pavlovian.
well, it's true, but it's like it's so funny how as real estate agents, people think our job is to sell people houses. No, that's just when we get paid. Our job is to know who needs to buy and sell a house, but to be able to serve them and actually get paid when we're working with them is understanding what they really want and how they really
Okay.
want it to get them to their end goal. Like that, it's like everybody's like, how do I convince them to do this? You don't. You
No,
don't.
there's no convincing.
You
That is
don't. Like if you
100%
think your
fact.
job, if you ever ask yourself, how do I convince anybody to do anything, especially as a real estate agent, stop. Stop. Because the
100%.
whole thing is that's the magic of what makes this business easy is understanding they know what they want. They need the guide and they're already the hero. They're already on their way. Like they just need the guide that knows like Yoda. He knew just the thing to say and just how to meet them to walk them and get them there. And there's the rare occasion. I think it's a lot rarer than it seems when you're an agent and once you like really get it. But it's like there is the occasion and it's a lot more rare than it can seem because clients can be frustrating that maybe that's not what they want. And one of the most valuable things that we can do is get to that quickly for
Yeah.
us and for them. We could talk, like, I love
Definitely.
talking about this stuff with you. It's so much fun because you're everybody, this Chelsea Werner, she's dialed in. Lead with grace. That is this woman.
I try.
Let's do the final three. Are you ready?
Okay.
They're really easy. Number one is when you think about your success in your career, what's been your greatest resource for that?
I mean, my greatest resource, I really have to say, is consistency. Like I am consistent in pretty much every facet of my life, whether it's outreach, whether it's being, you know, practicing what I preach, whether it's follow up, whether it's follow through, which I think are two very different things. I'm very consistent and I pride myself on that. And I also pride myself on really caring. Um, and I think those are the things that, I can do everything else. But if I didn't have those two traits, I would not be where I am today because I think people value that more than they know.
Consistency and caring. And then you just said follow up and follow through. Now, I have my own ideas of how those are different, but I bet a lot of people listening want to know what your ideas are of those being different.
Well, for me, it's like, people like they say you have to touch someone 10 times to get through to them, or like, it's all about the follow up. It's all about, which shows consistency. It should care, right? Follow up shows those things, but following through on something, I think takes it a step further. Like if I say to you, I'm going to do this, I'm going to follow through on that promise. And I'm going to, I'm dealing with a situation now where, we need to understand my clients love an apartment. It's their first buying together, they're newlywed couple. And, they're like, we don't know what the right questions are to ask. So like, we're leaning on you to really ask the right questions because we don't know what to do. So yes, I'm going to follow up with the contractor who did the apartment to ask about the AC and how we can bring it into the living room and things like that. And it's also following through. It's like, well, you actually don't need to just know about X, Y, and Z. You need to know how that's going to impact the ductwork, how that's going to impact the millwork, how that's going to, and these are silly, small examples. But my whole point with follow through is going that extra mile of not just being on top of the things that you said, but taking it that step further to show additional value.
Under promise, over
They
deliver.
might not understand that to add an AC. Yeah, and to add in an AC, you are impacting, there's other facets to that besides just adding in an AC that you have to account for. So a job that you think is maybe going to cost 30 to 40,000, it's actually going to cost 100,000 if we really dive in at, all the ancillary factors that are going to contribute to that. Now, I could have just followed up with what I said I would do, but following through to really, get them this additional information not only shows value, but it shows that I care.
Man, nicely said. That's awesome. I'm glad I asked. Um, Now, if there's a book that you would recommend of all the books that you've read, and it could be life, business, but if there's like a book in your world, what is it?
There's so many. I mean, you and I have talked about Never Split the Difference a lot.
So it's kind of fab,
I love,
right?
that's a good one. But I also think I told you, because I've changed my routine, and I'm not just in New York, I'm now in New York and Miami. I reread Atomic Habits recently. And I think that is so important because, you know, again, I think it speaks to the whole consistency thing, really understanding understanding routine, understanding habit forming, understanding the driving factors behind that, what pushes you. To me, that book is like such a good, it's almost something that I'm gonna force myself to reread every like 3 to 4 years, because I think it's important. So I'm on an Atomic Habit kick right now.
And that's
So
back to the
that's a
little
book.
things too. For me,
The
that
devil
book,
details, yeah.
Devil in the Details. It's funny because I'm so familiar and I'm familiar with so many things in a book. I have to admit, I've not even read it from front, beginning to end, back to why it's so amazing. I mean, it's not, I've read Never Split the Difference 8 times. I can't even get through Atomic Habits. Don't know why. But to what you said, I'm going to now because I said that. But to what you said, a big takeaway from what I know about that book and I always think about is the we underestimate the impact of the small decisions we're making in a moment, the small things we do for ourselves and in our business and for other people. It's the little things.
Absolutely. It's a great reset, and it's a great, and it it touches on so many other aspects of human nature that I find fascinating too. I mean, a lot of the principles and concepts are basic, like
Yeah.
it's stuff that you see in
You're
every
like, I
other,
knew that.
right. But I do think for me, it's a good reset. It's a good reminder. And it also helps, as far as like putting systems into place and organization and motivation and really understanding, you know, like I said, the driving factors behind every decision we make. I think it's really important. So that would
Yeah.
be my
That
suggestion.
book has a lot of reminders for you. What was it like? It's like a lot of stuff you're like, yeah, I know. Or oh yeah, that is cool. Just reminds me how true it is. For you, what was like one of your biggest like like whoa, like gets you out of that book
I
or
mean, listen,
takeaway?
we're in a career where like you can't like have it, you have to be okay with not having structure and a routine every day, because every day is a little bit different. And that's one of the beauties of this job, in my opinion. Like I enjoy that every day I have to do something a little different. However, I think it's because of that, it's really important to also ground yourself and create small habits that lead to bigger success over time. Oh my God, what is this? There's a quote that my husband says, it's a processes over outcome.
Oh,
My husband is he's big on that. And it's something that, especially if you're trying to, you know, grow your business, or really your personal life, anything, it all comes down to the processes over the outcome. It's why we come up with business plans. It's why we do a 30, 60, 90 day, when we're doing our goals, we would say, okay, this is what I need to do the next 30 days, the next 6 days, the next 90 days, because it's all about the process to lead to the outcome. And in an industry that we're in, it has highs and lows. There's so many things going on. There's so many changes. Every day is different. Having those fundamental kind of practices, I think, are really grounding and really important to long-term success.
well, and listening to that, I think a lot of people might initially go, well, that sounds awfully restrictive, but it's the exact foundation that gives you the flexibility to move fast and grow once you establish it.
Of course.
But
And
yeah, I can just hear like, oh, he's the devil's advocate. I'm like, no, 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 no. Make sure people like you guys need to understand this means you're more flexible, not less. No, but what else were you about to say?
well, sorry, I just lost what I was saying, because
No,
that's true.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And 8 months pregnant, pregnancy brain is
Well,
real.
we didn't even mention that, by the way. Like back to like what a badass woman you are.
Yeah,
Oh
no, my
man,
my brain
love
is
it.
it's not exactly how it was.
It will
It's one way
be.
to put
It will
it.
be. Then you
The
just got to
power
get
of writing everything down.
just get the sleep, right? Night nurse, which I did not. I had my babies in the Great Recession when like let's just make it as difficult as possible.
Right.
Last question. If
Okay.
there's anything, if we forget everything about this conversation today, if there's one thing you hope you and I and everyone listening will remember, What is it?
Um, I guess I would have to say the relationship of it all. Again, it goes back to never wanting a deal. This was truly the best advice I think I've gotten. Is you never want a deal more than your client, and just focusing, be authentic, care about the people, not about the transaction. It'll come back to you tenfold. I truly believe that. That's, to me, if I was like screaming at my 22-year-old self, that is what I would say.
And all of our 22-year-old selves, right?
And lead with grace. I like that too. But no,
I love that. That just something about that says a whole lot in 3 words.
yeah, but no,
Chelsea,
the
that,
relationship.
yeah, thank you so much. It's so awesome to have you on the show officially and to see you. And I can't wait for everybody to hear this and to share it.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun.